to The Double Up. I'm Shannon Hughes.
And I'm Rachael Tilly, and we're here to serve as the voice of women's surfing.
This episode, we catch up on a full month of all kinds of professional surfing, including 3 CT events and our very own Rachael Tilly winning yet another world title.
That is crazy to hear you say that.
It's pretty wild. I mean, you're now the reigning world champion for both the WSL and the ISA. It's so sick.
If you had asked me this time last year, or pretty much any time, did I see this like happening? The answer is actually not even in my wildest dreams. Like I dreamt of having another world title, and I dreamt of but not like this. This is, I'm over the moon.
It's also crazy to actually think back 12 months ago. So last May, the tour hadn't even started for the WSL. Like your 4 events to winning that world title were still a month or 2 away from even beginning. Let alone then the opportunity to come in with ISA, because you got in a silver last year at ISAs, which was your second silver, really good performance. And then, now to kind of think about that, fast forwarding 12 months, you got both the titles against just so many girls that you've competed against for so long, so many really healthy, decent rivalries. There's so much that's unraveled within the stories of you getting either of those wins.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's no secret that El Sunzal is well, now I can just say it's definitely my favorite wave in the world now. No, it's I do really enjoy competing there. It is such a competitive challenge to compete there, and I like the balance of all of that. And I know we'll get more into the details of the actual event later in the episode. But Shannon, I have to send you this video because I know you're not on TikTok and neither am I, but I've seen this video that ISA made, and it's when you're seeing a documentary of someone failing over and over and over, and it's black and white, it is in black and white, and it's showing me
Did
shots
the ISA
of me
make a fail video to success of you?
Yeah. Yeah.
I have not. This is the first time I'm hearing about any of this.
You need to go and look it up. The voiceover is you try, but you fail again and again and again and again. And as it's saying that, it's showing shots of me getting second, zooming in on my name, Rachael Tilly silver medal, me falling on a wave.
As if that's a massive fail.
And then it turns into victorious music, until you finally get it. And then it's me winning. But I had no idea they were making that. And it got I somehow fell upon it because I
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is hilarious. So you need to go watch that. Or any of our listeners, you get a kick out of it.
Okay, well, you'll have to, figure out and share with us. Also, the other video that has just gone absolutely insane in the last 2 weeks since you've won is the one of you about to get demolished up the side of the break wall. Has over 70 million views now.
Yeah, that's actually insane. That's
it's completely insane. You've fully gone actual viral.
Yeah, it I thought it would get we were all laughing about it at the contest site, and I thought oh, this will be a funny thing, people of surfing will like this.
Yeah. And
by the end of the day it was at 1 million views. And I've had a surfing video go viral to 1 million before, and I was whoa, that's pretty cool. We got there, and then woke up the next morning, it was at 5. By the end of the day it was at 10, and all of us were just looking at each other what the heck is happening right now? But again, similar to that, I really find a lot of humor out of reading the comment section of pretty much in social media in general. The comment section is so funny. There's so many that are is she mentally challenged? Or why did she pause to look at the waves? She could have made it up the wall if she didn't just pause to stare at the waves and look at the scenery. There's so many comments.
They're just ripping you apart.
Yeah, and there's people having fights back and forth through the threads.
Oh my God.
It's been a real source of entertainment, so that's been good.
That's going to have to be, part of my to-do list when I'm just feeling overly pregnant and I'm laying on the couch, not able to get up this week.
Legitimately.
Go back to the comments on that.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. So, and it was not that we were all joking, like before we got to the end of the event, there were, you know, like some like surfer and the inertia and whoever reposting it and saying like, you know, surfer or, you know, Rachael Tilly almost gets splattered across blah, 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 like just really like leaning into the drama of it. And so we were like waiting for, okay, if I win the event, it's going to be like the stories that'll come out of it is like rookie who almost dies ends up finding success and glory after, you know, whatever. Yeah, it was pretty funny that
so funny.
It got that the commentary that it did.
So good. I love even just like that last little bit. Well, like the very end of it, obviously, is just like kind of like Sam and I can't remember, is it Boleyn or Megan, one of the twos, and they're like commentating on it, you know, and they're like keeping it really professional too, which is like, yeah, they did a great job with the whole thing. Cause if it had ended poorly in any way, they would have been like carrying it really well. But I can see just being like in the background, like giggling through the whole thing, being like, oh my gosh, this is so funny. Rachel's getting smoked. Totally. But like the way that you just like run and you like, instead of like, you just like scale that wall to get up and then the lifeguards kind of come in slowly behind you and just like run their way up the steps. And it was like, oh, there was a really easy way to do that. And instead you just went straight for like, okay, I gotta get out of here. Like I'm in like Navy SEAL mode. You're just like scale the wall. Okay, I'm into safety. So funny.
I know. Well, we had watched so many people get demolished coming in on the shore break.
Like actually it just not going well.
Yeah, 30 seconds before me, I like watched Natsumi come in from our heat. Yeah. And she really tumbled up the rocks and kind of got hurt. She ended up being like okay, but it was like one that really rocked her around.
Yeah.
On the rocks, no pun intended. And I watched that and was like, oh shoot, like how can I try and like manage this differently? Is it possible to? And I saw sets coming and I was like, if I sprint towards the water, to the beach, like maybe I can get in before the sets come, because when they come, it's like a 15 wave set. I'm just gonna be like stuck diving under them. So I was trying to just get like out of there. But yeah, obviously. And you know what? At the very end of the video, our very own Aaron features in it as well. That's
little
the
hands
best.
on his hips. So cute. Yeah. Just there to make sure you're all okay.
Yeah. We both were just
Dad has arrived on the scene.
What the heck just happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. Well, I'm glad you made it out safely and we've all gotten some entertainment out of it as well.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Well, Rach, let's head into our monthly roundup. There's been a lot going on since the last time that we talked. Most notably, changes announced to the championship tour. We've got, a lot of contest results and things to talk through as well as we get through this episode. But before we got that far into things, I wanted to touch on a couple of things that I've been involved with within our surfing community over the last, month or so since we spoke. 2 film premieres. We had Lucy on to, kind of pump up and explain her new film, Sabo, that has been released. So she's just finished her Australian tour. She's now in the UK, and I know that tour is going so awesomely, but I had such a good time being able to be a host at her Sydney premiere, get to see the film firsthand, which is directed and edited by Lucy Small. She's featured in it as well, alongside a Patch of Light, who is an Australian Ecuadorian surfer. And it's all been filmed by Maddie Meddings, who's a surfer out of the UK that Lucy's currently on tour with over there. So that was like a really awesome thing. I highly recommend, if you are anywhere where you see that film is popping up, definitely go have a look at it. It highlighted some really fun surfing aspects, like kind of more, I think, Rach, our style of surfing of like longboardy waves, like, just kind of really fun, not like anything that's like really super gnarly surfing. But just done at like a really great level. And then with that, it taps a lot into what's happening on an environmental impact space within Ecuador and how locals there from like an indigenous community, local surfers, it taps into a few different communities that are really trying to fight to protect the rainforest, the oceans, everything in between from what's happening in Ecuador. So that was a really cool film. And then as I run out of breath, because I run out of breath easily already. Now that there's a giant sized baby inside of me, I can like hardly get through a sentence without just being like, okay, just give me a minute. I'm just going to have to suck some wind here to catch up with myself in order to continue my thought. So I do apologize to our audience. I'm sure this is going to happen to me plenty when I get onto a tangent in today's episode. That's just the thing that's happening now. There's another great film that I haven't seen yet. It's just starting its Australian premieres. It premiered just last week in Sydney for the first time. It's called Maya and the Wave, which is a whole background story to Maya Gabira. I'm so excited to be able to see that. We've got one playing close to home on May 30th, so I'll be there involved in kind of hosting that show as well. And I'm just so excited to see these couple of films coming out that are a little bit different than your standard girl surfing film, but tapping into, you know, a little more like kind of cruisy surf, an environmental aspect, and then Maya's of her becoming a big wave world champion and some really death-defying stuff. I'm so excited to get my eyes on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't had a chance to see either yet, so I'm really excited. I don't know, at the prospect of getting to see them. They both look like amazing films, and obviously us being friends with Lucy and being in contact with her throughout the process of her traveling there and filming it and getting to hear her speak about it last month on the episode. It sounds like a really, really special project.
Yeah, it was really incredible to see. And I think probably, you know, the same amount of heart has gone in behind the scenes for Maya and the Wave. Just messaging back and forth with Stephanie, who's their director, and the, you know, the effort and the lack of funding that they had going into that film in the first place to even make it happen is pretty much like a miracle that they've pulled off putting a full film together. And so that's been doing its sort of global premieres, and they're in Australia now for at least a month. They've got like multiple showings within Sydney. They've got Gold Coast covered and a lot of other areas as well. So if you're listening into this, check out Maya and the Wave on Instagram, and you'll definitely be able to find a location to check it out, likely in your local surf community pretty shortly.
Well, with that, another thing to chat about, Shannon, a big one to chat about before we dive into the 3 CTs and the ISA event that have happened literally in the past month, is that the WSL announced a massive overhaul to their CT schedule in 2026, featuring a cut to the midseason cut. But I'm going to put an asterisk to that because it's just kind of like, just looks a little bit different now. But
yeah,
no midseason cut anymore, no finals format anymore either. And they are returning back to finishing the event at Pipeline, and not even just as the Pipe Pro, but returning back to the Pipe Masters as the official name of the event. So, I mean, we'll talk more into it. I think it looks like majority of the core surfing fans are really, really happy with what we're seeing, including myself.
Yeah, I think, like you said, you know, the resounding response from the surf community is overwhelmingly positive, which is a first for the WSL across the last decade, maybe, to have a really positive response from the core community, and that they're really actually recognizing that that's the community they need to be tapping into. Like, to get that core community on board with things means that the sport's integrity is hopefully going to stay intact or get back intact. And then from there, on a genuine level, it can start to grow outside of just that core surfing community. But I think the fact that the changes they've made have been received so well, with very few questions kind of to, you know, what's happening, aside from the fact that we still don't have equal numbers, but we know that there's an increase coming into the women's numbers for next year, which is really awesome. I'm hoping that means eventually either that's going to bump up to equal numbers, going for even more women, or that they're going to end up cutting down the men's numbers potentially. Like, we'll see what happens over the next couple of seasons between 2026 to say 2028, maybe what goes on with that side of things. But outside of that, everything is pretty awesome, and it's really starting to return the tour to what it was for the men for the majority of years between like 1991 and 2021. That's 30 years of a pretty consistent tour for the men's side, which would start in Australia, finish in Pipe. And then now the women are also getting the actual full taste of that, which they had missed out on for so many years.
Yeah. And as I said before, there's obviously still asterisks. So we don't have to go through every single one. The first 9 events starting at bells, the 9th event is lowers. That is where then what they're calling the regular season finishes. Then then there is a cut. And I think I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. It's not exactly in half, I don't think, or it's not as big of a cut, as like what we see right now is what I'm trying to say. The people above the cut go and surf at Abu Dhabi and Paniche, and then everyone comes back together and surfs at Pipe. Now, some of the things to note about Pipe, one, even though if you didn't make the cut, the surfers that are competing at the cut are just surfing with, I think it's basically like a seeding disadvantage or a points disadvantage, because Pipe is worth 150% of the ratings of the points. So they have still weighted it heavily to maintain the fact that the world title cannot be crowned prior to that last event, because that was the whole point for the finals in the first place, is that, you know, if you had someone like John having an incredible year, it could be crowned 3 events before the very end, and then kind of makes those last 3 events seem nearly pointless. And WSL was trying to figure out how to control that narrative, like a Super Bowl, like a World Series, like an AFL Grand Final type of situation. But it obviously just doesn't really work for our sport. So this is their adaptation to it. They're still controlling that world title moment, but it will be finishing at Pipe. And the entire year does still play in a much bigger, more dominant way than we see like in the final 5. Also, a huge noteworthy thing and change to the format is that we're getting rid of the elimination round heats, which that is something that I've heard chatted about, you know, specifically in conversations with my dad and my brother, that if the events are so long, especially on the men's sides with 36 surfers, you're seeing a lot of similar matchups, event on event on event on event, especially in that round 1, 2, and 3. So I'm excited to see that. I was talking to someone from WSL earlier today, and something that they had said about the conversations, because they really did include the surfers, the CT surfers, into the conversation about these tour changes. And the change to the finals, the Pipe Masters was, or, you know, the new format in that was pretty like happily received. The getting rid of the elimination round was not so warmly received, understandably. But their kind of then pushback was that they wanted everyone to return back to compete in the Pipe Masters.
Okay.
So that is kind of how I heard that discussion like snaked through that. And, you know, I always love hearing, like, it's always a positive thing when I think the organization does, at least, you know, you can't take every single surfer's feedback on, because not all surfers are even going to agree amongst themselves. But hearing that they are having those conversations, I think that's something that has lacked within the WSL. And how, as we've seen them try and find their footing in these other styles of format. So yeah, I think overall, I mean, this is warmly welcomed, at least just trying to find something different.
Yeah. Trying to find, I guess, what sort of works on both sides. It works much better for an audience not to have a round 1 to an elimination round, because there's just literally no consequence in a round 1. The amount of time that it gets probably passed off, unless it's like a matchup that you really want to see, or the conditions, again, are really good at the location. So you're like, yeah, cool, I'm totally going to tune into this. There's no consequence to it. So getting rid of that from an audience perspective, I think, is such a positive thing. Like you said, you know, you've been having that chat with your dad and your brother, but it's been a very important part of the conversation within surf media and just like the surfing community for many years, of like, okay, if there are changes, if they're looking to shorten events, if they're looking to make this more reasonable on a long-term like perspective when it comes to how many days a contest takes to run, you know, do we need to have 8 to 10 hour days of trying to view as an audience until you get a winner? Or is there ways to like shrink this down to make it more enjoyable, more like easier to engage with as an audience, like we would see in a lot of other kind of typical sports, like, you know, where there's just a game in that day and it takes 1 to 3 hours to finish and then you're just done and that's the only thing you have to kind of see.
Sure.
So I think
and
that
having
those
more
are,
at stake with each round.
Exactly.
You know?
So like it shrinks it down. There's automatically like you have to hit the ground running. If you don't make that first heat, you're out. Like I think that feels brutal on the surfers, but I think it's also like it's how every other event outside of the championship tour runs. You get that on the Challenger Series.
Yeah. You
get that on the qualifying series. It's like been this kind of nice thing coming into the CT that you get this opening warm-up round essentially, but I think it being gone is not a bad thing.
Yeah, if you were to ask me whether I still want it on the longboard tour, my answer is absolutely yes. I hope they don't take it away for us. I think there is a difference though in a schedule that is 4 events long versus 11 events long. And I think that the difference there is like when you're surfing heats each week, pretty much of the entire year, you do get into a flow and you can shake off losses and you can, you know, where when you haven't surfed a heat for like 6 months and then you have another 2-month break and then like maybe you have one right after, that is where it is nice to like get back into the flow and have everyone actually like surfing at their best as the like rounds continue to go. So I hope that doesn't change for us. You know, we'll see. Obviously our tours are different and I think they recognize that too, but you know, we'll see. I just had my other point that I'm interested to see is how much this whole, like it being weighted 150%, how much that can really change the rankings. Like if you don't make that season, whatever, that line after lowers where you just go into 2 extra events, that almost to me seems like an advantage. So it will be interesting to see how much points wise it is like an advantage or disadvantage, because if you get cut off at lowers, you then have like 2 months to go straight to the North Shore and just surf pipe while all the other surfers are going to Abu Dhabi and then Paniche, which obviously aren't nothing like. So you're looking at your competitors actually getting to spend time on the North Shore and be in like, you know, get into maybe some earlier winter swells. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see if someone doesn't make it, but is right there on the cusp. If they win the event, how much does that shake up? I doubt the points will work out that they can then like win the world title, but could they end up top 5? You know, it'll be
like setting themselves up much better anyways.
Yes.
I think, so there's 2 things that I was like already going to lead into, and you've just tapped on basically both of them. So 1, it's going to be the top 8 surfers heading into pipe get seeded deeper into the draw. So that's like how that advantage works out. I think that's a pretty hefty advantage to be knowing that they're going to be seated farther in. It's less heats they're going to have to surf. Obviously, then sometimes it's like, well, you liked.
It's definitely more than 8 that go to Paniche and Abu Dhabi.
So the basic like, the draw card for the surfers is like, if you do well, you make it past the cut at trestles.
Finish in the top 8 and then
you finish in the top 8 by event 11. Then for the final 12th event of the season, although everyone is in, those top 8 surfers are going to be seeded through to whatever round that is. Okay. I don't know if they've told us that or not. I have no idea. Yeah. But that's huge. Like for you to think of, say, if you're seeded all the way to the quarters instead of coming in at round of 32.
For sure.
That's a massive advantage.
Massive.
Even if you didn't get that extra time to go spin on the North Shore or something. It's like
absolutely.
They basically made up for that with the fact that you're like, okay, you have 2 heats to surf or 3 heats to surf to win this instead of 5 heats or whatever it is. The other thing, though, that I find interesting, like you've mentioned, is the fact that so CT number 10 and number 11, number 10 right after the cut, the the reward to making the midseason cut is going to surf the wave pool in Abu Dhabi.
I know.
Which everyone knows our thoughts. The whole surfing world is still just like, what? Like, why have it? You know, like just, especially now when it comes to, so those two events, basically the purpose now of Abu Dhabi and Portugal, events 10 and 11 on the tour, are to work out the seeding heading into pipe. So that's really where you'd think most of the surfers are going to be solidifying that top 8 position. Maybe you have first and second or something that are already going to be so far ahead, like, you know, the conversation of, well, they could have maybe won a world title by the 10th or 11th event or something. For the rest of them, they're going to be looking for their seeding off of that. Looking for seeding for pipeline at a wave pool does not translate when it comes to the type of surfing that you need to do to like seed into that. It's really similar actually to a lot of the conversation that went around qualifying events for the ISA leading into the Olympics at Tehupo. For Tahiti, they wanted to have locations for the World Surfing Games that obviously weren't going to mimic chokes, but were going to be a challenge, a barrel, you know, like they weren't going to try and run it in beach breaks. Now, they didn't get forecasts that ended up suiting the locations they picked, like Puerto Rico specifically. So it really didn't amount to any of that, but at least they put that effort in to going, all right, surfers for the Olympics are going to be surfing at Chopu. We're going to try to somehow manufacture a challenging enough spot so the surfers qualifying for that have to surf their way through challenging barely conditions. Now for Abu Dhabi to be in the mix, like that's just, it just doesn't sit in that kind of conversation. Portugal, of course, with Super Tubos at Peniche, like that is a heavy barely wave. They get it good. That's like, we got to see some incredibly good heavy days there this year. So that sits well enough in that conversation, like 100%. But I did find those to be two interesting ones when it comes to deciding the seeding, which will then potentially ultimately decide the world title at a wave like pipeline.
Yeah, it's, while we're picking apart these things, sentiment overall is positive. I am looking forward to seeing this change. I think it's a refreshing change. I think so far what I haven't met the new CEO personally or like had conversation, been in anything from that, like, and I'm just saying this with the same amount of information as like we're all saying, but I'm observing like it's going well. I think the surfing world is taking well to it. I don't know whatever. Everyone's feeling positive about it. So I think that's like refreshing to see too. I don't think I've seen like positive. I'm like on this whole now, this meme culture on surfing, like Green Room Times, plus like all these other random like surfing meme pages now. Like not I'm on it, it's on my algorithm now. It's
right.
Like
it's just
all
like
over.
You clicked on one thing at some stage in the last few weeks and now this is all you're seeing.
It's all I'm saying. But there's been so much good content out of like about the changes to the schedule, like funny things, but everyone's taking to it. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that.
I think also like two things just to finish on that are, we're talking really positively about the WSL for the first time in quite a while. Like this is not standard conversation for the double up because we tend to disagree with most decisions that have been made. So we're really stoked with where things are heading. When it comes to like the women's tour, women have had elements of this structure, this new structure that's going to come into play next year, but it will be the first time ever that they get that full taste of it. Like they get to surf 3 CTs across Australia, Bells, Margaret River, Snapper. They get Punta Roca, which can be terrible or it can be excellent on the day, which we continue to see year after year. Saquarema is just like, it's almost like an experience being in that Brazilian CT environment rather than necessarily quality of waves, but it's like a part of what has been historically so important for the championship tour is those events in the beach breaks in Brazil. And then J-Bay, Chopu, Cloud Break, like for all of those for the women in a consistent run, especially with a finish at Pipeline, those are massive, massive improvements to the women's championship tour schedule that are going to highlight the strengths in women's surfing. It's going to push women's surfing to the next level. It's exactly what we as a fan base of women's surfing, it's what we've been begging for years. And we're finally getting to see that come to fruition, which is amazing. That tacked on with an increase of numbers coming in for the women's and the finish at Pipeline, that's incredible for the WSL. And it is a huge way for them to celebrate their 50-year anniversary and starting to make a statement that the women deserve just as much as the men do.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that said, Shan, should we take this conversation and talk about the three, since we have spoken last, and talk about what a jam-packed schedule. They are surfing so many events this year, just in the past month since we recorded since our last episode, 3 events have run. We're looking at El Salvador, Bells, and now the Gold Coast Pro that has just taken place. And there has been, there's always good surfing at it. There have been tricky conditions in all of them. There's been awesome conditions, and there have been some really, really great upsets and storylines that have happened in conjunction with it. So let's dive into that, Shan.
Yeah, I'm really excited. We kind of decided for our audience listening in, rather than, going back to talk about El Salvador, then talk about Bells, then talk about Gold Coast, we're going to just talk about kind of the overall of how the tour is looking for where we stand today heading into Margaret River. And then within that, we'll tap into the rankings.
Yeah.
The current rankings. Is that the same thing?
Yeah.
Sort of not. So where each of our surfers is sitting on, basically the 18 surfers on tour right now, where are they sitting? How have they found themselves in that position? Which will highlight a lot of what's happened across those last 3 events in the last 6 weeks.
I think interesting place to start out, Shan, is there's been 6 events so far, and we've had different winners at every single one. So we started with Tyler at Pipe, Katie at Abu Dhabi, Caroline at Portugal, Gabriella at El Salvador, Isabella Nichols at Bells, and Betty Lou now that just took place at Burley. So we haven't, at this point, normally, historically, we've seen one person have a couple wins so far. So I think the fact too that we're seeing, the likes of like Tyler, Caroline, although I know she's younger, we've kind of grouped her into the more like veteran conversation, Isabella winning along with the likes of Katie, Gabriella, and Betty Lou. We're kind of at a split of the 2 groupings so far. But I think overall, when we're taking a look at the rankings, it's definitely this younger generation that is dominating that top 10 placements in conversation.
It's pretty crazy too. Like I'm looking, we're going to get into things a little bit different in a second, but I've literally just pulled up the rankings on the WSL app just to see the point spread, because thinking of the fact that there has been 6 different winners in 6 events, I would assume that point spread has to be like actually really close instead of a typical someone's, kind of, or maybe first and second are really heading things up.
Yeah.
Gabby and Katie are currently tied for first, but off of the way the results work out, Gabby holds on to that first place gold jersey status. They're both on 33,850 points. Just below them, Molly in third is also on 33,000 points, but just below by 400. So 33,400. Drop 3,000 points. Isabella is still sitting on 30,000 points. Like that's really tight for that top 4 pack. And then from Tyler, it drops down to 28. So between 5th and 3rd, 2nd, 1st, that's a 5,000 point gap, which is like starting to get more significant. But I think that really speaks to like how insanely tight this top race is going to be to winning a world title this year. Of course, we're still going to have the WSL finals format and everything functioning as normal for this season before we get into anything different like we've just discussed for next season. But it's like we're not seeing that real breakaway kind of surfer yet who you would be going, okay, a Katie from last year, a Carissa for multiple years in a row, a Tyler who was in that conversation heading into WSL finals like 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Where you're like, all right, they should, like as a collective community, we support that this person is the world champion, even though there's going to be a WSL finals that comes out and obviously has come out differently than that. At this stage, we don't have anyone in that conversation, which is pretty exciting for the women's tour. I think that's like, it really makes it like nitty gritty coming down to the next run of events post cut after Margaret River.
Yeah, I think it just shows the level that for so long, the same top 5 women or 7 women were really dominating the conversation. And it's just showing how diluted that is now by the talent that's come up. And these conversations and these heat matchups really, you see some granted it was a super heat, but seeing Katie get knocked out in round of 16 at Burley by Steph, just some really interesting heats and matchups happening at the moment and upsets happening for everyone. So with that said, Shan, the top 7 surfers that we were just talking about have already made the cut, being Gabriella, Katie, Molly, Isabella, Tyler, Betty Lou, and Caroline. So they've made the cut. Side note to that, I saw Isabella post something today about her having already made the cut prior to Margaret River. And she said this is the first time since the cut has come up that she hasn't needed a pretty big result walking into Margaret River. And we have seen both victory and heartbreak happen at this very cut line for Isabella specifically. So I'm so happy for her in seeing the success that she's gotten.
That actually just gave me chills.
Yeah,
the thought
I can
of that.
see it on your face.
Wow, she gets, she gets to just relax. Not that she's relaxing in any way, because she's also in the top 5 conversation. She's gunning for that number 1 position now. She's really close. So she's got a lot riding on the rest of her season. But to just go in and know that your career is set for the year and for the start of next year, you're good to go.
Yeah,
actually,
absolutely.
for basically the whole of next year, because the cut comes so far.
Yeah,
so you're just sitting in a really good position.
Yeah, and the cut just basically doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So now at the moment we have above the cut line headed into Margaret River, but not confirmed safe, is Erin Brooks, Luana Silva, and Sawyer Lindblad. The surfers that need a result to bump one of those 3 girls out and make themselves into that cut line: Lakey Peterson, Vahine Fierro, Bella Kenworthy, Brisa Hennessy, and Sally Fitzgibbons. And the surfers that we are looking that definitely won't make the cut: Joanne DeFay, Tatiana Weston Webb, and Nadia Aristarbe.
So out of top 7 surfers have already made it. There's 3 spots remaining for Margaret River out of 8 surfers. So that's still, it's nice that there's still at least 3 spots remaining. But the fact that 7 have stitched it up ahead of Margaret River is it makes the job really hard, looking at those 5 that are sitting below the cut that have the opportunity to get in. Like you said, Nadia doesn't have a chance to, just based on points. It was going to be such a tough ask regardless, because she wasn't coming into a full season. She was that replacement surfer that got to now add herself into the calendar, but she hasn't surfed all the events on tour this year. Joanne obviously has tapped out, having a baby relatively soon. And then Tatiana also had a really poor start to her season, and then has tapped out for the remaining, surfed a handful of events, and then has pulled herself out of the conversation. Looking at that though, with thinking of Lakey, Brisa, and Sally in those positions needing results, Sally's now been in that situation for a few years running. So unfortunately, though, coming off of an incredible final result at Burley, just, a couple days ago, she's got a lot of work. She pretty much needs a win at Margaret River to try and get herself above that. For Lakey and Brisa, this is that's gnarly to think of those 2 being in that conversation. And then Bella's had she's been surfing so well. For Bella Kenworthy, for Vahine Fierro as well, we've seen some good results from them, but they've still got a lot coming in, and they've got all that pressure riding.
Okay, so with that said, Shan, I'm going to read this little explanation of what we're looking at in this situation in terms of next year's qualification too, because the cut obviously also has implications into the opportunity to surf on next year's tour. So the top 10 will make the cut and surf the back half of the year. The next 4 will make next year's tour, but not surf the back half of this current year because of Tati and Joanne pulling out. That means only 1 surfer won't make the cut for next year. At the moment, that's Sally. Despite her making the final at Burley right now, she didn't move on the rankings at all. So we're looking at basically one surfer. And as we said, that's Sally, but can absolutely change with the results of Margaret River, who won't have next year, the opportunity to compete on tour next year.
That's so wild. I think
through requalification, obviously,
right,
relegated to Challenger Series type of situation.
Yeah. And let's say it is Sally. Sally's likelihood of requalifying for the Challenger Series is like higher than any other, literally than any other woman coming into that conversation. Sally probably has the odds in her favor, the absolute most out of anybody, because she just has worked that system out so well. But it would be really hard for any one of those to think of being in that position, knowing that like making top 10 right now means they get the rest of this season, which is job security for this year. It's better finances for this year. It's as well as that shot to like improve their rankings heading into next season, to try and do something to break into that top 5 and go for world title. Like there's a lot on the line for that. If you're outside of that, you still have there's 4 people with that opportunity to just secure a job for next year. And then they've got to kind of work out the fill of the next 6 months. Or actually it's going to be longer than that, because next year's also going to start later, like probably April with Bells for Australia. But it's just some time to fill, but also knowing they can plan ahead, which doesn't happen for many surfers very often, where you can be like, yeah, cool, I know what I'm doing in 12 months time. It's like, well, for the next 4 months, I've got this figured out. And then who knows like what will go on next. So I think that's, I don't know. I love the fact, although that would be such a hard place for that one person, it's so awesome that it's just one now. And then within that, Joanne DeFay, Tatiana Weston-Webb, they're going to be in that conversation of applying for the wild cards, or I can't remember all the names of things at the moment, to get themselves in for next year. So we'll see where that lands. We're going to know that Steph Gilmore's likely going to be in that conversation as well, trying to get herself back into tour. She comes back to competing. I've heard rumors now that Carissa Moore is thinking maybe she wants to come back. Like,
what?
Yeah. So I don't know that's like,
I have not heard that.
I just, maybe not from next year, but maybe from next year, like she could put her hat in the ring.
Yeah, obviously really enjoying to the tour.
And it's such hugely positive changes to the tour for some of those surfers to think of coming back. I could even see with a tour like this being announced, like a Courtney Conlog trying to make a comeback. The same that we're seeing Julian Wilson on the men's side he's putting himself back in for the Challenger Series. He's obviously gotten a wild card into that and everything. Had a really incredible result now at Burleigh to prove like his surfing standard is still there, all the things. Courtney's been really vocal about not being on tour because of the changes that have been made over the last 5 years. This new tour setup is like a dream run for Courtney Conlog. She'd have to, either put in for wild cards to the Challenger Series or surf her way through the QS, but also she's that surfer who could do that and get herself back in like no problem. So I wouldn't be surprised based off of those things, like how much that shift comes in. This is also all speculation, but it's going to be a tricky one to see like who ends up with those replacements or season wild cards and that kind of stuff for next year, because we've got 2 women tapping out for kids in the conversation. You've got one based off of mental health. You've got one based off of having some fun and free surfing great waves, but she's also the 8-time world champion. So she's got a lot of weight coming into that for what she kind of just deserves to be given, It's going to be really interesting. I don't know. Now that I'm thinking about it, like it's so cool because of the increase in numbers that there's only going to be one woman missing out on next year's tour, bar requalifying through the Challenger Series, which is crazy to think that like we're finally at that stage. Like, how have we not been here before? And next year we're going to get 24 women. Like now post cut, Rach, we're looking at only 10 women competing in every event, which has been really frustrating for us for the last few years post cut. Cause it's like, well, the field is so small. You're getting the same matchups all the time. Like those women are getting to really push themselves and surf really well, but also it's a tiny field. Yeah. Like imagine we were only seeing 10 men surf in 5 events, every event over and over again. That just doesn't happen. For next year, we're going to come in with already 24 women per event. Like that's so sick.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the passion behind that, because it's true. I'm in agreement. There is so many names there that you just imagine. And I think too, off the back of that conversation of Steph, wanting that spot potentially back on tour next year, as she voiced at the beginning of this year, is getting to see her compete at Burley and watching her legitimately get matched up against the current world champion, Katie, was a really great heat. Seeing her beat that, I was hoping to see her continue on, as I think probably most people were, and Erin got the best of her on that one. Although I still like Steph, and not to get too tied up into like a Burley specific conversation, but the heat between Steph and Erin, Steph was like the people's champ for me. She was a much more entertaining person to watch. Like her opening score was only a 7, but she got some beautiful turns and a really beautiful little barrel. And like just her read of the wave and her freshness and her approach to everything is pretty unique that we're not seeing from the other girls still. I mean, obviously she's Stephanie Gilmore, so that's how she has her 8 world titles. But to see that freshness and that liveliness still to her surfing, it looks like the break has served her well. And she's coming back just with so much in her surfing that I think we weren't seeing as much in her heat surfing prior to her leaving. So the prospect of that definitely has me excited. Shen, should we start breaking down the situations that we're seeing with each surfer as we're looking down this list?
Yeah, so saying that, Rach, let's just dive straight in. So we're going to go through all 18 surfers from first ranked down to 18th ranked, talk through the highlights of what they've had through the last, 3 events that we've missed between El Salvador, Bells, and now Burley, or the Gold Coast event, and also just what has landed them into their current ranking. So starting off with our current world number 1, Gabriella Bryan, who will be wearing the yellow jersey heading into Margaret River. It's so exciting for her. She was able to wear that yellow jersey for the Gold Coast event for Burley, which was her very first time in her career making it to that status of the yellow jersey. So that was really fun to see her competing in that color this last week. For her, making the quarterfinals at Bells was enough for her to make that jump above Katie, who was holding on to the yellow jersey. Katie was eliminated in the round of 16 by Sally Fitzgibbons, and that's where Gabby's results from then onward were able to get her enough points to take out that yellow jersey away from her heading into the Gold Coast. She lost in the quarterfinals at Bells to Isabella Nichols after having defeated Bella to take away her second CT victory in El Salvador. So Gabby had an incredibly good run in El Sal, which was rad, as well as Bella having made it to finals there was really significant for both of them as far as where they're sitting on the standings at the moment. And so even thinking of bells for Bella to get one back on Gabby straight away in their next head-to-head matchup after that final was pretty special for Bella. It was her second final against Isabella Nichols for El Salvador. Their first was their first ever head-to-head, which was the finals at Margaret River back in 2022, which Bella took the win at. And I remember being on the ground there for that event, and it was a really significant one for both of them because they each needed the result that they got to keep themselves above the cut for the tour for that year. Bella needed to win. Gabby needed a second, and that's exactly how the results wound up, and they were both able to stay on tour in 2022.
Yeah, so a strong start to pre-mid-season cut, like we were talking about Isabella as well for Gabby. Looking at Katie, who's now in second, but again, as you just said, due to that tiebreaker situation, still equal points for first. She had not the strongest of the past 3 events in comparison to how she started her campaign this year, losing to Gabby in El Salvador in kind of just a funny heat for the both of them. And then back-to-back round of 16s for Katie. Like you said, losing to Sally at Bells. And I think this is Sally obviously is someone who does really well when it's crunch time and when she comes under pressure, because now we're finally, as that mid-season cut is approaching and she's back on Australian soil, we're seeing her really start to push the envelope and actually get the results that she's been trying to get all year so far. So that's great to see. But as for Katie, that means she went up against Fierce Sally, round of 16 at Bells. And then, of course, gets the matchup of the season so far in terms of wild cards being Stephanie Gilmore. And that was a great heat. Katie got the single highest wave score in 8-something, but it was Steph who was able to walk away with it with a couple of 7s.
Yeah, it's crazy to think, I don't know, of that little run for Katie at Burley for sure. Yeah, so looking now at number 3, Molly Picklum. She is sitting in a very close third in the rankings. Like I talked through the points at the start of this conversation, like 33,000, and then 30,000 for Molly. Like everyone's in a really tight, compact space. Actually, she was even in that 33,000 point, and then it's Bella at 4th who's in 30,000. So she's right there in that conversation. If she places one heat better than Gabby or Katie at Margaret River, she'll take away the yellow jersey heading into the back half of the season post-cut. So that's a really enticing position for her to be sitting in. She is, interestingly, the only woman of the top 7 to not actually have an event win this season, which is pretty wild. That said, though, she still has only won 2 events within her CT career. Both were at Sunset in back-to-back years, 2023 and 2024. So we're waiting for her to find a CT victory this year to solidify herself, I guess, within, those rankings on that side of the conversation. However, having said that, she is coming across as the most consistent surfer across the tour for this year. Up until Bells, she had placed in semifinals or better for every event, which no other surfer could say. So for her, consistency, her absolute strength this year, just needs to figure out what it takes, post semifinals into that final conversation to actually walk away with a win. But other than that, she's had a pretty outstanding season so far, which speaks to where she's sitting in that numbers conversation with the top 2. She was also probably the standout surfer of the event at Burley until she hit an in for Betty Lou Sakur Johnson, who surfed incredibly well in the quarterfinals to beat Molly for the first time on the CT. They've had I think that was their 7th matchup. The previous 6 matchups have always gone in Molly's favor. Wow. So that was the first time that Betty Lou got the nod on her, and that took away Molly's kind of real run of the stamina that she had through that event and being the standout surfer.
Well, next down the list, number 4, Isabella Nichols is the person I'm most looking forward to chatting about quickly here. Is what an incredible run she has had, and a combination of, I think, personal life that has interwoven in her story over the past few events. She missed her twin sister's wedding to compete in El Salvador. And obviously a huge deal for her. Her and her sister are very, very close. And also they are twins. That, which just means they're even closer. They're twins.
Yeah.
Missed her twin sister's wedding. And she posted a really nice thing, just, thanking her family for being so supportive of her following her dreams out there. So, for making such a big decision for your career, I think everyone makes sacrifices in their career, whether that's missing things, friends' weddings, family events, whatever it is. And this is obviously a really big decision that she would have had to make. To see that result in a final for her was really satisfying. And I was going, oh man, that would have just been the perfect story had it been a win. But I'm so happy that it wasn't, in terms of which event would I know she would rather win. Well, it would definitely be at Bells
100%.
With her family absolutely there.
Yeah.
She goes from a 2nd place to Bells Beach, where Bonsoy, her lead sponsor, she's no longer with Billabong anymore. She has her main sponsor being Bonsoy on the nose of her board. Bonsoy is the main sponsor of the event, or one of the biggest sponsors of the event. And, to see her rise to the win with all of that support, with all of those eyes, with all of that kind of commentary around her, is just so satisfying to see from a competitive story. And like we talked about, obviously she would be knowing she did need a couple of results to solidify herself a bit stronger into that mid-season cut conversation. And so now that she can be walking into Margaret River without the stress of the cut, she just really deserves it, because watching her drop off the mid-season cut the last time, I actually made me want to throw up. I actually know exactly where I was when I was watching it. I was at my parents' house and we had it on the TV, and it just really was that sickening one of like the organization really using the drama for
just trying to get
clicks. I guess the emotions for the drama, I should say. And she was devastated after not making this heat that she lost in, and they're zooming in on her. And it was just like, I was like, I don't need to be watching this right now. Like, this is not, I don't want to feed into this narrative, because this is heartbreaking to see. And so anyways, to see her now on obviously she's gone through her own journey and coming back from that requalifying, and her surfing's looking stronger than ever. You know, I really, really loved her surfing throughout those events. Like, she's looking so informed, so beautiful, a real standout amongst the rest at El Sav and Bells. So anyways, I told you I was excited to chat about her and everything that I think these results reflected past just the actual points that they give her. So yeah, that's really great to see.
So good. I'm just so stoked for her. She's on a great run this year. It'd be so cool to see her make it into the final 5. And also, like, we don't talk about sponsorship stuff very often on here unless it's like a controversial thing that's happened and we're discussing it like on the greater toll of you know, this surf industry or something. But the fact that she's not with Billabong anymore means that she is actually repping the coolest wetsuits on tour this season, because she keeps wearing, I think it's they're from Atmosy. And they just look so cool. Like, it's finally one of those like smaller niche brands that's getting to really be showcased. And I have loved that, because she looks so stylish while also surfing really well. But it's not just absolutely, you know, the kind of normal that we're seeing from everyone wearing like the same black or the same whatever it is from the same like 3 brands, like Roxy, Billabong, and Rip Curl or something. Like, we're getting to see some cool stuff. So I've really enjoyed that from Bella. On to surfer number 5 currently. So talking our top 5 surfers, Tyler Wright is rounding out number 5, 2-time world champion. She started the year off with an absolute bang, taking a win at Pipe. She's done that in the past when that event from Maui got, you know, finished off at Pipe, 2021 maybe? Many years ago. So for her, started out really strong, but has had some pretty mixed results since then, has alternated between round of 16 finishes and then thrown that in with some final series finishes as well, which has just kind of got her sitting in that pack of like, she's done well. She hasn't done exceptional outside of that first win. But that said, coming into Bells, she really started to look super sharp again, which is no surprise, because she just has such a good relationship with that wave, with the community at Bells specifically. Like, she's always, I think, genuinely the most grateful and excited surfer to be on the ground there. So that's really sweet to see. In that event, it was a semifinal finish. She lost out to Bella, who went on to eventually take out the win, which was really cool. But it was just, you know, that kind of, again, result was clear that her relationship with Bells is as strong as ever. She's taken out back-to-back wins in the past in 2022 and 2023. So it wouldn't have been surprising to see her walk away with even a second CT victory this year there. But yeah, we're starting to kind of see that younger group of surfers, and that speaks to those top 4 being Gabby, Katie, Molly, and Bella, start to really take over from that older guard. And it's been impressive to see Tyler Wright hold herself in that position given the rest of, you know, those top 7.
Yeah. And now looking number 6, Betty Luciker Johnson, obviously just off the win at the Gold Coast Pro. It was her second final she's ever been in. Her first one was against Molly at Sunset last year that she got second place. So this was her first ever CT win, a huge feat, especially the fact that she was below the cut line prior to this event. And this event has now not just gotten her above that official cut line, but has solidified her above the cut prior to walking into Margaret River. So has obviously really helped her in her rankings, moving her up from, I think she was 13th, and now she is 6th after that win. Other notable conversations, Shan, you already mentioned her matchup against Molly. This was their 7th head-to-head matchup, and this was her first win against Molly. That was in the quarterfinals. Then she went on to go into the semifinals in a pretty controversial conversation that has come out of that, I think, with her priority tactics against Vahine Fierro. Very, very aggressive in my analysis, and I think pretty much everyone I've talked to analysis of it. Very intentional, very deliberate. So playing a little bit dirty with her priority tactics, but I guess that's her prerogative. If she wants to do that, it got her the win of the heat and got her into that final against Sally. And
it's one of those Sally, where it's like fully within the rights of the rule books, everything. She did exactly what was in front of her. We've seen other surfers. We saw Tatiana Weston-Webb do that at the Olympics to Brisa Hennessy. Very similar situation. It doesn't sit the best, but at the same time, it's fully within the rules. And she walked away, like both of those surfers walked away with heat wins because of those moments, potentially.
Yeah, you're right. It's within the rules. It's just kind of one of the tactics that like leaves a bad taste in your mouth that you're like,
yeah.
Like priority tactics absolutely come into the play when you're trying to win a heat. It's not always the best surfer who wins. It's the person who put together the strongest heat. But then that's like another level of it. So yeah, that was interesting to see that aggression there. And she wanted it and she saw an opportunity and was able to manufacture that. So we then saw her jump into the finals from there on. And from there, it was a clear win. She dominated that final the entire way.
100%.
Comboed Sally, I think, pretty much within the first 25 minutes. And Sally never got out of that combination situation. So that final really looked like was really hers. And she dominated. The conditions were really tricky. And it seemed to me every single heat, she just was in really good flow with picking the waves that continued to provide opportunity and continued to open up and were the cleanest ones. So she had really good wave selection throughout the event that obviously really manifested into the result that she was able to get in her first CT win, which is a huge feat.
Yeah, absolutely massive. Looking at number 7, Caroline Marks, she's got a world title. She's our gold medalist from the Paris Olympics. Incredible year from last year. It's been interesting to watch her now in this year's, conversation of things. She's kind of slowly drifted down the rankings over the last few events. Hasn't really looked in form, I would say, throughout the entire season. She's had some results, but it hasn't been these big, convincing, she's the surfer of the event kind of award results. It's been sort of that she's surfed some heats that have maybe strategically landed in her favor or just have been really challenging from a conditions, and she's just snuck ahead, which is pretty much exactly how she took out her win in Portugal, which has her, sitting in that already having made the cut conversation as that 7th surfer to have already made the cut. Portugal wasn't, that particularly convincing win. She took out Gabriella Bryan in the final, and it was Molly Picklum in the semifinals. Both of those heats, both surfers had heat totals in the 7-point range. It was literally like 4-point rides and 3-point rides, and it was splitting, it was just really close. Like the surf wasn't great for them. They weren't able to find anything that was going to unleash massive scores anyways. And for Caroline, she was able to just sneak ahead by 0.5 in her heat total for each of those heats to walk away victorious, which is not to say a win is a win, and that's great for her to have that. It's obviously done well for her for the season now. My thoughts on it, potentially just the fact, and we see this so often in sport, so we see it so often in surfing, where that surfer that's come off of an incredibly good result the previous year, or a team that's come off of a great result, can have a struggle in the next season. That said, she is potentially still kind of just recovering and resettling herself down from winning Olympic gold medal and almost winning the world title last year in the same season. So she had 2 incredibly strong results from a world tour perspective, and then as far as an Olympic perspective as well. For her to now come in and back it up straight away would seem like a challenging thing. And I think that's kind of what we're noticing, while also being sprinkled in the fact that she has a victory. Molly Picklum can't even say that for the season, but she also just hasn't really found her form yet. So I'm curious to see if we get to see her click into gear at any of these venues for the rest of the season and really get to like appreciate some incredible surfing from Caroline.
Yeah, onto that, Erin Brooks is someone I think we've also been waiting to kick into gear is probably not the right term. She has been showing, I think seeing her in that gear consistently is what probably people had more expectations of. She's had a lot of round of 16 performances. She made the semis in Portugal, quarterfinal finish at Abu Dhabi. Other than that, besides up until Burley, were all round of 16 finishes. So she did a post-heat interview with Lakey, or sorry, after beating Lakey. She didn't do it with Lakey.
Like, oh, Lakey's on broadcast? Interesting.
Yeah. After beating Lakey in the round of 16 at Burley, she said, I haven't been on the glass in 2 events, which is super frustrating because I have very high expectations for myself. And with that, in that heat, she earned her first of 2 9.43s. Later on, she earned another 9.43 going against Steph in the quarterfinals. So really strong result. She'd be feeling really good off the back of that, especially that performance, a 9 and then an 8 something as well against Steph to get that win against a really informed Steph. So that was an impressive win that she'd be feeling really good about. Like I said, though, or like we talked about earlier, she is not in that safe zone. So we're now, from here on out, Shan, as we're going down this list, talking about women who do need a result to solidify themselves into that midseason cut conversation. And I think it probably comes as a surprise to a lot of people for Erin's rookie year, especially after seeing her win Cloudbreak last year as a wild card, that she's obviously coming onto tour with a lot of quite like explosive moments. But I think there was probably a lot more expectation of consistency, which she's clearly feeling on herself too. And so knowing that other people also probably had that expectation on her, I'm sure is like quite the exercise of learning how to deal with all of that on her rookie season.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, this is now being highlighted because she's on the championship tour, and this is where the most eyes are going to be watching her as a competitive surfer across her young career so far. But we've seen her kind of struggle to find her space in her competitive performances with that type of expectation over the last few years. Like watching her obviously had a good run to finding qualification to the championship tour, but when it came to qualification for Paris Olympics, it was like everyone just thought, she's going to have this stitched up. It's going to be the easiest thing. She had a few hiccups when it came to citizenship, which event she couldn't compete in with Canada, a few things like that, which would have added extra pressure to her situation. But when it finally came down to those qualifying events through the ISA World Surfing Games, she didn't make the heats she needed to find her qualification for Paris Olympics. And so she missed out on what would have been the first really huge opportunity of her young career. And so now to kind of having that found qualification on the CT, she's now in her rookie season for this year. Like that was a tough one in 2024 to swallow. Now in 2025 to not know if she's going to make the cut. I think that's probably a surprising position for the Brooks family to be sitting in, actually, as like a whole, where she's had some of those really flary, exceptional, fun moments that we've gotten to see, like that heat against Steph. It'll be interesting to see how she handles this final event. She is, of course, looking good to make the cut in the sense that she'll be on tour for next year. It's not a guarantee, but again, we're going to see 4 surfers that don't make it in top 10 this year still get to, have a repeat season next year. So she's likely to be in that conversation at least. That said, as I catch my breath, because it's so hard to breathe right now. Number 9, Luana Silva. So cool that she's just getting to have this opportunity on tour. I'll get to that in a moment for this season. But she broke out of a season-long, kind of rut of round of 16 finishes with her first ever final at Bells, which was huge.
Mm-hmm.
Backed it up with the quarterfinals at Burleigh. So 2 big results here in Australia. Really stoked for her. Still not safe at all, though, in the relation to the cut conversation, which since her rookie year of qualifying in 2022, she has not made the cut. So if she does make it this year, that will be, a massive kind of notch for her in her belt when it comes to the things she's jumping through as a competitive surfer, but she hasn't done that quite yet. She also, from 2022 hasn't been able to find that requalification onto the championship tour as like a set requalifier. She was off tour for 2023, and then in both 2024 and 2025, she was out of place by 1 person on the Challenger Series, which is so brutal back-to-back years. That, however, awarded her positions onto tour. For 2024, it was when Carissa Moore pulled off that she was then given a spot to compete. And for this year, 2025, it was because Steph Gilmore pulled out, and so she was given another slot in. I think, coming off of a World Junior Championship, she won the WSL World Juniors just at the end of last year, I think is when it ran, unless that was started this year, but I think that was last year still in the 2024 calendar year. For her to come off of that and to eventually find herself with a final finish at Bells is really awesome for her career in this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Very happy for her and that Bells result, especially. All right, moving down to number 10, Sawyer Lindblad. We have seen her in a couple of quarterfinals this year at the beginning of the year and then more recently at El Salvador. But other than that, we haven't seen her break through into the quarterfinals all that often. We did see her in a similar position heading into Margaret River last year, needing a result. And last year, she was able to secure that runner-up position that secured her spot on tour moving forward, and then therefore also got her the opportunity to win Rookie of the Year last year as well. So she's heading in a similar position, needing that result, but knowing that she could get one. So we'll see how big she can go again if she's making this a yearly thing. Heading into Margaret River. Well, I guess yearly thing this is the last year that she needs to do it.
Yeah.
Because totally. This is the last time the cut's at Margaret River.
Yeah.
So
number 11. So that was top 10 who are currently sitting like above the cut line to continue on for the rest of this season. Coming in from number 11, now there's going to be 4 more spots available for surfers to not surf the rest of this season, unfortunately, but they're going to be back on tour for next year with the increase of women's numbers, which is rad. So Lakey Peterson's...
But the surfers can also switch out any of those 3 names in Luana, Sawyer, and Erin to make it above that cut. Like it's kind of still anyone's game at this point.
That's right. 8, 9, and 10 are not safe going into Margaret River to stay on tour for this following year in the top 10. 11 through 15 really have that opportunity to get themselves into that conversation, which is cool, or at least solidify themselves for next season. Lakey Peterson, currently sitting number 11 on the rankings. She started the year really strong with semifinals at Pipeline, which was awesome. But outside of that, she's only made it into the quarterfinals at one other event. That was at Bells, which is like a home event for her. That's where her husband, Tom, he's from that area. So they spend a lot of their time in that Torquay kind of Victoria region of Australia. So that would have felt great for her to at least make quarterfinals at somewhere that she feels probably the most comfortable. She had a really stinging loss, though, in El Salvador to Sawyer Lindblad in the round of 16. And that was, she put up a big post on Instagram afterward, just kind of talking through her feelings around it, where she thought her surfing was sitting. And I thought that it was a great post. It was good and honest, but also it really was like, yeah, her surfing's right there. She just unfortunately came up against one of those heats of the rounds, and both surfers, Sawyer just was able to get on top of her, but it was a high scoring affair. So I think for her, that was a pretty challenging one. And she now, due to that also, she could have gone on a run with her surfing to take a win out there had she not had probably Sawyer in that heat. So yeah, she's got some work to do to keep herself at least in that top 14 conversation, if not jump into the top 10.
So number 12, Vahine Fierro, her rookie year on tour, she has made 2 semis, which obviously is two exceptional results. Unfortunately, not having the base level consistency in her other results to have her sitting higher than 12th. But I think, sitting in a good position right now for, like you said, Shannon, that extra 4 spots that will get allotted for next year on tour. The fact that she's had those moments of greatness that have brought her to the pointy end of the event of her rookie season would have her feeling really strong because of that.
Yeah, and looking at number 13, Bella Kenworthy, she's in a similar conversation to what you just said about Vahine. She's had 3 quarterfinal finishes in a row for 3 events in a row, but still needs big results. And to me, that speaks to the size of the women's tour. Quarterfinals on the men's tour, you're sitting above the cut line. You're looking pretty easy because there's so many surfers. But when the tour is smaller, when there's, less opportunity, you need to be making finals and semis to really be solidified in there, or at least having wins paired with those round of 16 or quarterfinal kind of finishes. So that's where Bella's kind of found her struggle so far, I think, is just the fact that the tour is so small, because quarterfinals is like she's made it to finals day at least. Mm-hmm. She also had the heat of the event probably in El Salvador against Gabby Bryan. I was just looking at what the scores were from that. Gabby won with a 17.4. She had a 9.23 and an 8.17 in that heat. Bella had an 8.5 and a 7.17, which would have won any other heat, probably of the round. And of course, it comes down to likely the waves were just pumping in that heat of anything, and they both surfed really well. But it's going down,
incredible day of surfing that day.
Yeah, going down to Gabby within that heat.
So number 14, Shan, we have Brisa Hennessy, which is such a shock in this conversation to see her sitting so far down, especially as her being a finals participant previously. And last year she had quite a consistent year as well. It just seems like this year she's struggling with that consistency. Like we talked about with Vahine, she has had moments of greatness. She had a really awesome semifinal finish just at Bells. She's had a couple of quarterfinals at Pipe and El Salvador, but she's had 2 elimination round losses, which took place both at Portugal and most recently at Burleigh. And so having those elimination round losses obviously massively hurts you in your points and your quest for moving up the rankings. So that's where I think looking at points wise at this point, you'd rather like lots of quarterfinal finishes than like 1 semi and 1 elimination round loss. Having that consistency you do get rewarded for. And so that's where this is really starting to hurt her.
Kind of similar to, well, a little different, but, looking at where Sally Fitzgibbons is currently sitting on the rankings, she's down at number 15. She had a terrible start to the season, unfortunately, and that speaks to her still sitting there despite the fact that she then got a quarterfinal finish at Bells and a runner-up, a second place finish at Burleigh, just now on the Gold Coast. Unfortunately for Sal, because of those early, really early losses for the first part of the season, and only having that 1 quarterfinal to back up her second place at Burleigh, getting a second there didn't even move her on the rankings. Like she didn't even go from, 16 to 15 or 15 to 14. She just stayed sitting at number 15. So she, in that context, has a, massive requirement in front of her heading into Margaret River in order to make the cut. She's going to need a huge result there, likely a win. And that potentially could still be dependent on how the other girls in the draw go.
Yeah.
If even a win could get her there. I haven't actually looked at exactly what that.
You haven't done all the math and all the spreadsheets of all the.
I used to do that.
Situations.
Now I just don't.
Yeah.
It's so nice to just be like, well, I think they're going to need to do really well. But I think for Sally, the absolute highlight for the season was her run at Burleigh. She had such a good run up until that final. It was so fun to watch her just click into form, feel at home with that crowd. She always surfs really well on the Gold Coast. She surfs well in Australia in general because she feels.
I was just going to add to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You see her really feel herself and thrive when she gets onto Australian soil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is so understandable. She is probably the most famous surfer in Australia across like what's happened in women's surfing. Like there's obviously bigger names for results, like a Steph, like a Lane Beachley, etc. But Sally, from like the people's people of Australian surfing, she's that one that's just tapped into every aspect that she can to be part of the national surfing community. And I think we really see that and feel that when she's on the ground. And that's a Gold Coast feeling specifically as well. The number of kids down there wearing, a Fitzgibbons jersey, etc. So that was really special. Unfortunately, she kind of went for a tactic in the final that we've seen her do in El Salvador in the past as well, where she's just kind of putting down the bread and butter of good surfing and then gets there and then has a little bit of a struggle, hasn't quite gotten a good score, and then just starts either relying on landing errors or just some like feeling like she needs to bring something very different to the conversation rather than just wait out a really good wave and surf it just the way she's been surfing the rest of the event. I think she would have easily had Betty Lou had she taken that approach. So it was a bummer to see that kind of like fizzle out.
She went to
in her final
tactic so early on in the final too. Like you saw her at 25 minutes, which is still a lot of time it's a
lot of time left in
conversation. And already started, she started the heat out trying to land a couple of airs, and it was kind of like, oh, that would be awesome if you just like started the heat out with a bang. Didn't get them. Betty Lou started to post scores, and it was like, okay, now let's switch tactics and actually post a few. And then, it seemed like she just started to crumble a bit on that pressure of like, okay, well, I need to get a score. The conditions were really, really tough in terms of wave selection. You had to be on top of it in wave selection, which we've already talked about Betty Lou having fantastic wave selection up into through the final to her win. And so Sally just started throwing in those airs, and then you watch her tactic change where she's like, I'm just going to stand up on a couple small ones and try and loosen myself up. And she'd just do a little turn and then fall on that too. And then that's when you see the wheels start to come off. But, we're talking about a final finish here, a runner up. That's something she'd be so proud of. And she's a surfer that really feeds off that momentum, and she's going to leave it all out in the water at Margaret River and really try and take this one away, obviously, as are all of them. But she's a surfer, like we talked about again. We've seen her in this position in this crunch time, and she kind of really eats this, like she's such a sport fan through and through, even as a competitor in herself. So I'm looking forward to seeing if she'll be able to really push it towards that pointy end of the event. If the waves cooperate, if a lot has to go right. And as we said, a lot has to go right, not just for her, but for the situation in general. At this point, I think she should just be fighting for not trying to be that one person who doesn't make the cut.
Yeah.
Because that's where she's sitting right now. Right now, she's that. There are 4 people they don't make the cut, but they do make the tour next year. So there's just one person right now who's not, and it's Sally.
Yeah. Looking at number 16 on the rankings. So we've got 18 surfers in total that actually hold championship tour rankings for the season. These 3 surfers, not in that conversation of cut in any way. So that ends with Sally. Joanne DeFay has tapped off the tour. She's having a baby. We've had this conversation. Really excited for that new season of life for her and for her husband. That said, she may or may not get that 2026 season wildcard. Steph Gilmore already has one. So if Steph decides to come back, which I would think after Burley, she's probably going to have a little bit of that like
fired up,
fully that fire to get back into the jersey on a consistent basis. And then Tatiana Weston-Webb is also going to be in the running for that. Plus, there are rumors, like I said earlier, that Carissa might be trying to make a comeback as well. So for Joanne, having a baby, deciding to take herself off of tour for personal reasons on that side, it's going to be an interesting one to see where the conversation sits with someone like a Tatiana, who's also deciding to step off of tour more for mental health reasons and keeping herself in check there, which in the past has reflected pretty well on a comeback from the WSL with a season wildcard. And then also a Carissa holding multiple world titles potentially wanting to come back as a new mom as well. So some interesting new points to the conversation when it comes to wild cards on the women's tour that we haven't seen in an extremely long time, because none of the women have had kids aside from, those early days with Elisa Anderson, like, years and years ago. And so yeah, it's exciting to see that Joanne's in that conversation.
Yeah. And, talking about kids, Honolulu had her baby while we were in El Salvador, which is so exciting.
Little Rain.
And she has every intention of returning back to tour this year. So, which I really hope she does. I would love to see her, have her traveling on tour with all of us, and all of us just passing the baby around and hanging out with him. So I love the prospect of, like you said, if Carissa were to float coming back too, like getting to see these women assume so many different roles is really cool to see. I think too, it hits me in a different way now, being 27 years old. Not that
I'm a future godmother, a very soon to be godmother,
and a soon to be godmother,
really, really differently.
Yeah, and of course, I hope to be a mom one day, and like looking at that as a competitor and the competitive implications it can have on your career and all of that, and of course, like for me, Honolulu being one of my closest friends going through that on tour, it's been really inspiring to see. I'm really excited to see how she's someone who would handle that with so much grace and poise.
Yeah.
And like things never faze her at all. So she'd be someone to like cruise back on, win the first event and be like, I told you guys it wouldn't be hard.
Life's just so fun and I just want to keep surfing.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh.
You're like, okay, all right. Well, if she can do it, I want to at least try.
Yeah, like what, 9.5 months pregnant, she was still hanging 10 at Haleiwa. So
seriously,
I'm like, oh, maybe I can still get out there and try and catch 1 foot wave here at Thurul.
Yeah,
at the beach break. Yeah.
So I love to see it from all these women that we're getting to observe and watch them go through that and share their journeys with their fans and us. So yeah, I think it's really great to see.
Number 17 on the rankings, Tatiana Wesson-Webb pulled out of the tour after an early loss in Portugal, and has kind of now shared that a large part in her reasoning to pull herself off tour had to do with her very close friend, Greg Browning, taking a turn and ultimately passing away shortly after. He's a massive influence in the surfing community over so many years. There's, I think, the number of people that have posted just the best of the best about him and who he is as a person. It speaks for itself and his impact in the surfing community. And with Tatiana, he was certainly one of those people that has had a really, really substantial influence on who she is as a woman today, as well as her approach to being on tour, the friendships and relationships that she has with other people. And they've also were working on a film together called A Marble in the Jar, which is coming out very shortly. So for her, it's sad not to see her on tour, but I think it's really mature of her to have kind of considered the implication of the weight that Greg's condition and then ultimately losing him was going to take on her, and to take care of herself first.
Yeah, absolutely. Finalizing this conversation at number 18 with Nadia Aristarbe. We talked about this earlier, Shan. She got that call up because Steph did not take her spot on tour, as we saw that happen last year as well for Carissa. So not getting the results to actually work her way up. Obviously, that's tough in terms of not having the opportunity at all the events, but a really great opportunity for her to get that call up that she wouldn't have been expecting. So super cool.
Yeah, she's received, like you said, those 5 opportunities to surf. Out of 7 would have been extremely hard to be making the cut regardless, knowing that, you're throwing away 2 results automatically that you don't even get to have. But really exciting to see her put some performances together and ultimately to just showcase that her surfing does belong. She's had a couple round of 16 finishes, a couple of elimination round finishes. So she's certainly still finding her feet, but I think her surfing on its own certainly stands the test. And I'm really excited to just see her journey. Also, being the first Spanish surfer on the tour to be able to represent a newer contingency, or a different contingency of Europe in that championship tour conversation, what that does for Spanish surfing, as well as what it does for her surfing for the future.
Well, Shannon, that is pretty much everything that's like the season so far in a snapshot, broken down by each surfer with their highlights and lowlights of what we've seen in their results. So this all coming to a head with Margaret River kicking off in about a week or so. Yeah,
by
from
the
the
end of
time
this
of
week.
recording. Yeah.
Yeah.
So by the next time we're chatting, we'll obviously be able to talk through the aftermath of who we're seeing move forward, and then they're coming to San Clemente lowers. Woohoo!
Oh, yeah. Are you going to actually be home for that event? Because you just seem to be liking maybe one night of sleep in your own bed, maybe two max, but then you get tired of it and you're just on to the next location.
No, yeah. I'm exhausted right now. I'm seriously exhausted. I think I will be home, so that will be really cool.
Nice.
I have an e-bike now.
Oh, whoa. Moving up in the world, moving up in the surfing community of San Clemente.
I am very San Clemente now. It's cute too. It's not like all the other bikes down there are black. Mine's like blue with an orange basket and like an orange trim.
No
so
surprise.
I feel like, yeah,
that's
it's very
Rachael
fun.
Tilly all the way. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am very San Clemente these days. It does feel very San Clemente to be cruising around on my e-bike, but I am loving it. And from my door, it takes 15 minutes to ride from my garage down to churches/lowers.
Sweet. And you feel good riding
streets.
that far with your longboard on your bike?
Oh, yeah, no, it's no biggie. They're just in the racks. Yeah. So I started saying this as if I might ride down there for the event. I will not be riding down there for the event. I will be watching the event on a broadcast, probably with chips and salsa with my family from the comfort of my couch. But either way, I do love it when the tour comes into town. So looking forward to that.
Nice. Well, Rachael, let's shift gears away from the WSL, away from the Championship Tour, and talk about a very fun result that you just walked away with in the ISA World Longboard Championships, according to a very dramatic TikTok social media video that the ISA put out. We now know
I was a failure again and again.
You were a failure for so long getting those silver medals as just a little. What? How old were you with your first silver medal? Like 13 or something?
15. Yeah, in 2013. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's it. Okay. And then another silver medal failure. Finally, you've walked away with some success in your career as an ISA gold medalist. How are you feeling?
No, I am feeling so proud of this one. I think because of those silver medals, I was really, really proud of those silver medals when I got them as well. Like the first one that we talked about when I was 15, that was my first ever international event.
Yeah.
And I just...
So good.
I fell into the repecharge round like super early. I got the sickest I've ever been in my life and was basically like throwing up right before my heats, and somehow just like kept making heats and found myself in the final. Like looking back on that, I don't even remember most of it because I was like literally in a fever dream. But I was so, so proud to have just made the final in an international event. And honestly, I felt super similar last year. It was my first return back to an ISA after quite a few years. After the previous year, I had commentated with you, Shannon, and that was my first time to El Salvador 2 years ago, commentating. And I was watching this wave going like, gosh, I think this wave would suit my surfing. I should do the qualifier and get back on the team and come back next year. And so again, to have just like made the final and walk away with a medal, I just felt really, really proud of. But this year I would have been disappointed with anything but. Like I really went in with an intention, and I had said it to my family prior to going that I was like, which I never really say out loud, I think to preserve disappointment, but I was like, I am going and I really, really want this one. So I definitely went in with that intention and kind of like allowing myself to admitting that desire and that like want to myself, which I think normally I put off because it just adds pressure internally. But I think the pressure was one I was like happy to welcome, and I was looking forward to getting back on that wave, and I felt really excited about the equipment that I was bringing with the board that Josh and I just made. It's so, so beautiful. And so, yeah, the fact it all came together, and not without a few really, really nail biter heats, especially the last one being the final. Like, we were waiting on the beach probably for more than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
At
Well,
least.
that's so long.
Yeah, it felt like an eternity. And the whole time I was just thinking, wow, we're all standing here in anticipation, and I'm either going to have like condolence hugs and have like one reaction, or another reaction that is just like obviously like really excited and getting. And I was thinking about that episode in The Office when Michael is, sorry, this is a niche reference if you haven't watched The Office, but Michael
Then you
is
should.
yeah, finding out if Holly is engaged or not. And so he's making a happy box and a sad box.
Yeah.
And he finds out she's not engaged. And so then they run into his office and they're like popping the champagne and playing the music, and he has all
the
his
happy
like
boxes come out.
The happy boxes come out, that sad box gets to be put away. And I was just thinking, like, I had one in my head of like, okay, so like if it's the sad box, like I'm just gonna like be like, okay, well, it was like a good run. I mean, it would be a silver medal anyways, so like happy with that. And if it's not, like I just get to like celebrate with everyone here. And we got to get the happy box because we were waiting for a score from Alice. She needed like a 6 something, and it came in as a 5 something, which I was figuring she was getting. I hadn't seen the wave, but I am so confident in her ability that I was like, it's probably going to be it. And yeah, like the fact that it kind of all came together in that like dramatic way that WSL is so trying hard to manufacture. And like, it's really nice when you do actually win it out the back, and it's like a done deal, but it feels pretty sweet when it's like down to the wire and it does come in the way that it did. I really got to celebrate with my team, and of course Aaron was there too, which was so great to have him there and get to talk to you from afar. But yeah, there's my little summary.
That was so good. I actually haven't even watched the final, but I woke up that morning because it was like, you know, you won sometime in the night here in Australia, basically. And I woke up in the morning and it was like, Rachael won the title, you know, everything. And it was so awesome to just be like, oh, yes, okay, finally. Like, I just remember feeling like relieved and just being like, okay, cool. This is so awesome for where you're at in your career now, too. And I feel like for just so many things of your life, we've had this conversation about, you know, the seasons that you've gone through here on the podcast multiple times, but we tapped a lot into this after you won your WSL world title, your second one. Whenever we had that interview, maybe like November, like
November, October, November. Yeah.
And it's just, I feel like even hearing you say again that I think you said the same thing about around that win, was like you'd finally allowed yourself into that place of a little bit of that vulnerability personally, of being like, I actually want to win. So I'm going to put everything into that. And if I don't, it's going to really, really suck. And to know that you went into ISAs with that same mentality, rather than just being like, I want to win, but I'll be so satisfied with a final, or like so satisfied making it in the WSL to say top 3 or something, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's a big shift. And we hear that from athletes like across so many different sports when it comes to that, really like, I want the win and I'm not going to be satisfied with anything else. And then for you, making that decision twice in this last like 12-month period has resulted in you winning.
Yeah.
That makes me so excited for the start of your WSL tour. It makes me so stoked for like just where you're at, the run you've been on, the fact that Sunzal is going to be a repeat event on both calendars with huge results, like, or huge consequence, because ISAs will always be for a gold medal. It's a once-off event. For WSL, it's the finals event for sure, at least for this year again. So
yeah, I think we'll be returning there for a while.
I think so too.
I love that wave, so I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, something my brother had told me, my brother and dad and mom had pointed out, is that out of the past 4 events I've competed in, I've been chaired up for the last three of them, which is crazy. So that's US Open. Then I didn't get Abu Dhabi, then the world title, and then ISAs.
Right. That's
so, and I say that like, kid. What?
Pretty good consistency.
Yeah. I'll take it. I think that plus something Aaron had told me after this win was I was the first girl to be the reigning WSL and ISA in the first year, or in the same year, sorry. So like, I say that not out of bragging, but like I legitimately can't believe that I'm here in this position of my career. It feels like a fever dream right now, honestly. Like I am trying to figure out like what's happening. I think I'm in a state of being like present and really enjoying it, which is like a huge piece of the puzzle. But then at the same time, I'm like, how do I bottle this up so that like I can remanufacture this like when I want to? I don't know. This is, I'm just like really, really, really grateful to my family and, you know, to you, Shannon and Aaron, like who have been through, as you said, so many seasons and phases of my life and so many on the opposite side of this and all the lows and like encouraging me to pick back up and try again. And like, I had a small circle around me that always said it could come back to this if I, you know, worked hard enough or if I wanted it to. And otherwise, like if I didn't have you guys, my family, Josh, like saying that, I wouldn't have believed it on my own. So thank you for being my belief when I didn't have it, because I can't believe we're here now.
It's so exciting.
Yeah.
You did it. Yay.
Which obviously, like, I feel like you could probably sense my emotion around this is like, this one did feel like a big deal, you know, to me, just in my personal goal. Like, I mean, I guess they're all personal goals, but I was so inspired by Honolulu getting hers last year. And I've been so inspired by Tori.
Also, I was thinking about Tori.
Yeah, she was another person who has the like the WSL world title and an ISA one. So I really wanted to join their club, basically. I think like their feat and what they have in terms of their career stats is just incredible. And they, you know, help set a goal for me. And I'm so inspired by those two surfers, especially. So it's been like emotional, like right afterwards, we had to go do the drug test and I couldn't, which what a way to like celebrate. You have to go like straight from the ceremony to go get drug tested. And I couldn't pee enough because I was so dehydrated from the day. Sorry to get into these details, but I couldn't. I need to pee 100 mils and I only peed 40. You're pro surfer. Yeah. And so I had to sit there and
60 mils off. That's a lot.
I know. And I had my phone and it ran out of battery. And so I just sat there with bottled water, like waiting for like an hour until I could pee. So I guess that moment gave me some time to reflect. And I got like close to tears that moment of just like letting myself absorb it and go like, oh my gosh, wow. Like all the goals that I had set for my career from like a young girl have now actually been ticked off.
Wow.
So, because now at this point, like unless it was the Olympics, now it's like adding another number to it.
And that's not even a goal that you could have had. Like Carissa talked about that, you know, you didn't have that goal as a kid because it wasn't a reality. And now for longboarding, unfortunately, it's still not a reality because it didn't get into LA. But assuming it gets in for Brisbane, like,
then like maybe that can be a conversation, but yeah. So it's finished.
Wow.
Which is so
wow.
cool.
You can just happily be done. Done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm having too much fun with it. So anyways, sorry that turned into such a long tangent, or conversation about that. It's not that comfortable for me, like talking a long time about that, but I was happy to share, or I was excited to share, because I think for these listeners too, or our listeners, Shannon, so many of them have been on the journey for all these years. So I'm really excited to like, I think if you're not sharing it with your community, like what are you doing it for? Like, obviously, first and foremost, if it's your own personal goals, that's great. But like, what makes it sweet is to share it with everybody. And that goes for you guys and our listeners too.
Yeah. I think it's also, I think for like everything that you've kind of done coming into this last season, you're becoming like, not that you weren't known before, but I feel like more and more people are starting to also know about you, know your story, pick up on who you are as a surfer. Girl. Shore break girl. Getting smashed against that break wall.
Yeah.
Those swan dives back into the ocean to avoid the sets. Yeah. There's like, obviously there's that side, but there's a lot of people also, like, even for Aaron and I in our like small surfing community, like, you know, people know that you and I are friends. Obviously we do this podcast together, but also like you're just one of my closest people in my lives, and you've been here to visit us a couple times. But even like on that scale, and I feel like this is happening in lots of different pockets around the surfing community. Like I've got people that have been coming up to me over the last week that have seen, either because they follow you on social media or they follow something that's posted about this. And they've just been like, oh my gosh, your friend Rachael. And it's not people that have met you at all or anything. They just like know we're connected. Like, she won the like so many people. I had like one friend ring me the moment he saw it on Instagram, and he was like, oh my gosh, that's your best friend. She just won the ISA. He's like, can you believe it? And I was like, yeah, hey, Zichi, like, who also listens to the podcast. It's the coolest thing. But like that, to me, it was like, I feel like it's such a cool thing to watch who you're becoming as a person also in the surfing community, because longboarding hasn't always had the eyes on it. It doesn't have, you know, that spectatorship that the shortboarding community has, just from a like fame perspective and all that kind of stuff. And I think for me, it's been really special to be like seeing people celebrate you because they've now gotten to see these, either they listen to the podcast and they've been, you know, tuning into your little tangents on everything in your life and the Rachelisms, or they've just like now are paying more attention to the sport and they're so thrilled. And I think it also speaks to like who you are as that fun loving, like you're such a people's person, and to see you take out a win of an ISA event as well. Like I want to also tap into a few highlight moments from that in a second.
Yeah.
But you're on an event site, like everyone loves you. Just like they can't help it because you just get on with everyone and you, oh my gosh, you go horseback riding. Like you just, I don't know, you just put yourself, I'm like thinking of you jumping on that horse last year.
Yeah.
There's like so many things that you just like put yourself straight into it because you're like, just that's just who you are and that's where your energy goes. And you give so many people so much time. And so I think that's a really special aspect to now seeing you win. My impression of like, even that celebration after the fact, like all the videos that friends were sending me that I was missing out on in El Salvador, and you guys like dancing and all the things, is like the stoke levels for so much of that longboard community, seeing you win specifically, is pretty special. And I know that there's overall excitement when whoever takes out a win, but you, I think, get a lot more support than what a lot of the community does, and it's because who you are, and I think that's really cool. And
oh my gosh,
I don't know,
thank you,
it's really sweet.
I have nothing to say, but thank you so much. Okay. That was so sweet. I just wanted to tell you that. I know, thank you. It's baffling to me that we're even having this conversation, so
yeah. It's so good. Before we wrap things up though, should we chat through a couple of those standouts from the women's side? Because there was also,
absolutely,
you did not have an easy run, like you said, to actually taking that win. Not only waiting for your score on the beach for that long, but just like the fact of who you had in the final between Alice Lemoyne, Maria Fernanda Reyes, and Sophia Culhane as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it went deeper than that. One of the first standouts, Shannon, that we can talk about, Mara Lopez, 14-year-old from the Philippines, was a standout from day one, posting excellent scores pretty much every single day, advancing through the main round pretty much the whole way. And I think until finals day, or maybe the day before, where she got knocked into repechage and only like narrowly missing that. But amongst all of us, like, I had her in my heat on the beginning of finals day. That's right. And I was like, oh boy, she's one of those, like one of the young girls that the round before I had Alice, Maria, and I had someone else, but it was like veterans, you know, and I was like, actually, I think I'd rather this because Yeah, but I know how these girls compete. It's scary going against someone like Mara, who's 14 years old, and same as like Ginger from Italy, who's also around 14 years old. These young girls that are coming like such underdogs and have this like complete new like they're coming in really wanting it, and it's like pretty unpredictable to compete against. So yeah, she was a huge standout. And the Philippines as a whole, JR Esquivel getting
Yeah,
us an individual medal. That's super cool to see as a country as a whole, seeing them just have so much success in the world stage.
Yeah, it's so awesome for JR. That was at least his second medal at the ISAs, maybe third.
Yeah.
But yeah, to see now like that boost, we've seen Daisy on the team. She absolutely rips. She's got such beautiful style. And now to see that like young surfer like Mara starting to show up in that conversation too, they've got some like a very, very promising future that they're already like showcasing. And to think that they've got that youth on their side as well, not just those kind of veterans of the sport who have been around for a while, is really special. Ginger Kaimi, like you said, from Italy, she's put together incredible results. Like coming in, I think her first ISAs that we really got a good sight of her, she was 11. She must be 12 or 13 max now. She is like tenacious. She would see you in the draw and she'd be like, oh yeah, cool. Okay, I've got Rachael, whatever. Like I reckon that's kind of her mindset, and then her surfing matches that as well. She's like a little bit like a Katie Simmers of the longboard tour. Like when Katie was really young coming into some heats for worlds, for ISAs, and then for QS stuff. And just like kind of being really cool headed. Sure, I'm sure feeling pressure, but
she seems really unfazed.
She doesn't seem
in terms of stress. She comes in really calm, cool, collected.
Yeah.
And her style off like out of the water too is really cool. She's like just in the middle of the dance floor, dancing with everyone. Yeah. She's like 13 years old. She had like the coolest, cutest outfit. Last year I put her on my shoulders, and she was a lot smaller last year. But this year I was like, okay, we got to keep it going. So I put her on my shoulders again. And she's just like such a cool, fun person. And I'm really excited to see where her career, how it evolves and comes out. I think too, like having the prospect of when we're talking about Mara and, you know, surfers like Ginger, it's just like a matter of like at what point they'll be on the tour with us. Yeah. So the prospect of seeing both Mara and Ginger, Philippines and Italy, currently countries that are not represented on our WSL women's longboard world tour, is I think just like so cool to see.
So exciting. Yeah. Really cool to see them put together good performances. And then Tilly White as well. I just wanted to mention her. She had a 6th place result. She, surprisingly for me, that's her best result to date for ISAs, but awesome to see her like, you know, finally get some breakthrough performances there too. Because she comes in typically as a top seeded surfer for Team Australia. She's really consistent when it comes to performing at events of this level. She had some great WSL results as well. And I think for a nation that typically, you know, has had world champions out of it in the past, she's held a lot of that pressure on her shoulders for many years, alongside like a Kira Molnar competing for Australia, you know, time and time again, or a Lucy Small. Like there's other surfers that have in the current kind of pack that have been in that conversation. But I just thought for Tilly, that was a really special thing to see her break through to that point and to be able to just, I think, lock in. She's such a good free surfer, and sometimes her heat surfing struggles at that really high level. So I thought that was really cool. And that she and Natsume Teoka would have been just outside that final conversation alongside of, you know, you, Alice, Maria, and Sophia.
I think with Tully too, I mean, one, she was free surfing so incredible in between heats and every morning, but she's someone who really has so much support from back home with just the manly board riders behind them. Her and Declan normally traveling together, and they have really gotten behind the longboard community in representation of Tully and Declan. So I know going home to her community with a 6th is just, she deserves it. And I know everyone back home would just be so, so proud of her.
She also just graduated. Like I saw her put up a post yesterday or today with her bachelor's degree, something science and environmental science, maybe.
Incredible.
Yeah, she's one of those people that's the real deal in that conversation as well, who's like, representing Patagonia and lives and breathes it, like on the ground, what she's doing in her day to day, the kind of stuff that she supports, that she doesn't, what she gets involved with. It's 100% following in the footsteps of Belinda Baggs, who's another incredible talent in longboarding that has come out of Australia in the past, but has really been like laying her life down for the environment and protecting our oceans. And Tilly is right there with it. So huge congratulations to her for finishing out that degree. She's going to be one of those that I hope sticks in competitive surfing for a long time, so we get to see her there, but has a very big future outside of just being a competitive surfer as well.
I think that's like the happiest note we could finish on this episode. Anything else, Shan, that you wanted to touch on?
No, I just really liked it. I loved, because we've had like, kind of a 6 week, we kind of aim for about every 4 weeks for this year to get an episode out for like a monthly wrap up episode. But you've been on the road. There's been slightly a little bit going on. We knew it'd be pushed back anyways because of ISAs. We figured better to wait for that event to finish than to now have to wait another month to talk about your win and everything. So that was fresh. But I even just reflecting now to see where the girls in the CT are sitting, like heading into the cut. I think it's it gives me a more invested interest in watching that event coming up at the end of the week. And I'm also just so stoked we're going to get to see more of the girls on tour the next year. Like, I don't know. I still have my qualms with the WSL of things that I'm not in support of what they're doing. But for right now, I'm feeling really pumped about what's been happening and where things are going.
That does not get shared lightly. So yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah, I agree. I'm looking forward to, I think too, like the weight of the cut and all of this in years previous just have so much weight and like bleh emotions that sit in my stomach around it. And the fact that we know this is the last year, we know that it's increasing. We know not many women are, only one essentially is getting cut in terms of relegated out of the world tour. Just like I don't have that same sinking stomach in my feeling, sinking feeling in my stomach. This is showing that it is 10:53 p.m. here and it's time to wrap it up. But yeah, I feel the same. So anyways, wrapping this whole episode up on the positive notes, and we'll get to tune back in after all the drama of what unveils in Margaret River.
There we go.
And you'll be 1 month closer, 1 month bigger, Shannon.
Oh my gosh. I'm already feeling massive. I'm 30 weeks pregnant now, and breathing is hard, walking is hard, clothes are hard. Getting up and down from sitting or laying it's hard. And then I think I have I'm going to grow a lot more. It's going to get way harder.
Well, she's looking amazing, people.
I know. I've been playing like footsie with her. She's like, puts her little foot out, I poke it in, and then she just pokes it back out like half of this conversation. It's been like a game.
That is so fun. Has Erin been able to feel her kick more?
Oh yeah. And now it's like, it's not to the stage where it's like, we'll see my whole stomach like do this. Apparently that starts happening, or you'll see like like an elbow just like move across the whole thing. But it's like earthquake.
Shaking your belly.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, because there were a couple times where I felt her kick.
Yeah.
That we had to not tell Aaron, which now I feel fine telling him. because he was trying so hard.
Every time it still happens, I'll be like, oh, she's going crazy. And then he'll like come over, as fast as he can, and then she just goes silent. It's like she knows. It's really funny. And then he'll take his hand off, and then she'll start going again. And then he puts his hand back on.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah.
I have another really niche. This time it's a SpongeBob reference, but I'll leave that for another time.
Okay. Well, congratulations, Rachael Tilly, godmother of my daughter. I'm so proud of you for winning another world title and solidifying your position as her surf coach in the future. You're definitely in.
As if that was ever a question. But thank you very much. And keep growing our little baby.
Will do. Enjoy Fiji. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
after your next adventure. Which you take off for in less than 24 hours.
I do. Oh gosh. And I haven't even unpacked from El Salvador or Texas that I was just in.
Also, because you've been home from Texas for less than 24 hours.
Also true.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted, but it's all for good reasons. So anyways, time to wrap up this episode.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
See you later.